Guys, Mr. Bowman here. Today's learning objective is in green. We're learning to draw a normal distribution curve from a given context. The key bit of information, the key thing we're doing for this learning objective is we're learning to draw them based on the information we have or the information we're looking for. So each normal distribution curve has 5 bits of information. So we're going to write that down. Part of our notes. There are 5 parts to every normal distribution graph that we're going to be looking at. And some of these parts relate to the calculator. You can see I've got a bit of an input on the left-hand side. This is something we don't know too much about, but it's something we're going to be very familiar with shortly. But the first thing is normal distribution is all about probability of a certain event. So one part of information is the probability, and that's what this calculator or this input would calculate. So you plug in all your numbers and a probability will be calculated. You also need to know something called the lower, and I'm going to call that the lower bound. We also need to know the upper, so the upper bound. You'll see 2 symbols on the calculator screen, so it's a bit of a circle with kind of like a flick at the end. That's the symbol for standard deviation. And the final bit of information we need to know, it looks a bit like an M, so it's the Greek symbol for mu, and that there is the mean. And all of this information we need to visualize in a question before we start. So just to help us go through all of this, I've got 3 questions on the right hand side, and we're going to go through, we're going to draw each of these like a normal distribution curve. So as you start every question, you kind of draw yourself a curve. Doesn't have to be perfect. You can see mine's a bit wonky over here. Maybe the right hand side's a bit longer than the left hand side. Doesn't have to be perfect. As long as you can see that bell shape, you'll be all good. We're going to start off with the mean. So this is how I start off with. The mean is normally in the middle of that. So I draw a line going down just to tell me, well, that's the middle of the peak. And below that there is the mean. I then move on, so we've done the mean, I then move up to the standard deviation. I normally write the standard deviation in the area, top right. So I'm going to go standard deviation equals, and then we write our number down there, and I'll get to the numbers from question in a little bit. We then need to know that lower and upper bounds. And finally, you got the probability as well. So let's start off with, so we know the mean's in the middle. And we can see our question, a person's height can be modeled by a normal distribution with a mean of 170. So I know down here that there is 170 centimeters. And I can also see it has a standard deviation of 5 centimeters. So that means my standard deviation up the top, that there is 5 centimeters. From this, we know that the probability of a person being taller than 180 is roughly 2.2%. So what we're going to do is we're going to draw here, and we're going to go 180. That's the bound given to us by the question. And it says taller, so we're looking for anything more than that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to shade in the area that it relates to, anything more than 180. The issue is the upper bound normally sits at the end, but technically this curve goes on forever. So when you're dealing with the end, what I want you to do is I want you to write 9999. And that there would be our upper bound. And finally, the probability, at 2.2%, that relates to the shaded part. So that there is 2.2%. So you can see all 5 bits of information are present in our graph. We can see the mean. We can see the standard deviation. We can see the upper and lower bounds. That depends on the shaded area. And we can see the probability of that shaded area as well. Is question 1 done? Let's have a look at the next one. Before I even read the question, I'm going to draw my normal distribution curve. And we're going to get into it. So if a car has a mean weight of 1,500 kilograms, so that's the mean, that relates to the middle. So we'll write that down there, 1,500 kilograms. I'll get rid of my units there though. And a standard deviation, so standard deviation of 75. So we're going to do that at the top right. Standard deviation 75 up in the top right. Approximately 1/4. So 1/4 is actually a hidden probability. So that tells me that the probability is 25% or 0.25. of cars weighing less than 1450 kilos. So 1450 is less than that 1500, so I know it's going to be on this side. So let's write down 1450 over here. And less than tells me I'm going to shade in everything below that number. And again, I've got the tail. So there's no real lower limit. So what here, I'm going to do my 4 nines, but this time negative 9999. If it was up here, it would have been positive 9999, like the other question, but we're dealing with negatives. And finally, the probability that relates to the shaded area, let's write 0.25 this time around. So you can see 5 bits of information. We've got the mean, 1500. We've got the standard deviation. I wrote 7.5, but that should be 75. I can see my lower and upper limit, negative 9999 and 1450. And finally, I can see the probability, the 1/4 or the 0.25. Hopefully this is beginning to make sense. And the final one we want to have a look at, that orange one. So again, I'm going to draw my curve. There is an 84% chance, so that's my probability, that a rabbit weighs between 1.5 and 4 kilos. So that's my upper and lower. Assuming that there is a median weight of 2 kilos and a standard deviation of 0.5 kilos. So we can see that 5 bits of information popping up. So there's our mean. So it doesn't have to be perfect, and that has a mean weight of 2. Standard deviation, top right, 0.5. My upper and lower limit, so you can see my lower limit is 1.5. That's going to be below the 2. So I'm just going to make up, doesn't matter where the numbers sit. So let's do 1.5 here. And the higher limit, 4, that's definitely going to be well above the 2. Let's maybe draw the 4 over here. It's between, so we're going to shade in between those two numbers. This time around, we're not shading more than, we're not shading less than, we're just shading between them. And finally, the probability, 84%, that relates to the shaded area. So let's take that out here, 0.84, 84% you could have written as well. But you'll see those 5 bits of information coming out. You've got the probability, you've got the lower limit, the upper limit, the standard deviation, and the mean. All 5 parts coming into that diagram as well. But when we're dealing with a question, whilst all of our questions have all 5 bits of information, you will need to calculate or work backwards to get any one of those 5 numbers. We're going to start off in the next video by calculating the probability of certain events. And then we'll move on to the upper, the lower, the mean and the median, and the standard deviation after that as well. So guys, hopefully you found this video useful. We focused on drawing our graphs from the given information. Now let's get into some practice.